My name is Wanda Townsend. I'm 38 years old, and I keep other people's books for a living. At my brother's wedding last June, I was told to stand near the wall so I wouldn't ruin the family photos. My seat at the family table went to a stranger with a ring light, the +1 of the bride's cousin. So I walked to the gift table, lifted the cream envelope with my handwriting on it, and told the room not to worry. I would stay out of the frame forever. My brother came running after me across the parking lot, and half the guests watched him do it. But here's what none of them knew. The envelope was never the real story. 5 days later, a lease agreement sat on my coffee table with a tab marking the line for my signature. What happened in my living room that Thursday night made the wedding look like a warm-up. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is the place where quiet people finally get to tell you what happened at the family table, and what it cost everyone who underestimated them. If stories about family, loyalty, and long overdue boundaries speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because before I tell you what I refused to sign, you need to see what I had already paid for. I run a small accounting firm in Millbrook, Ohio. 3 employees, 1 coffee maker, a bell on the door. Townsend Accounting sits between a hardware store and a diner, and my clients are the kind of people who still write checks. Farmers, widows, a man named Earl who brings his receipts in a bread bag every April and trusts me more than he trusts his own bank. I bought my house at 31, a little brick bungalow with a crooked porch light I never fixed because I like knowing which house is mine from the end of the street. My life balances. That's not a brag. It's my trade. Debits on the left, credits on the right. And if a column doesn't add up, somebody is lying to you or to themselves. For years there was exactly one column in my life that never balanced, and it had my family's name on it. I had stopped auditing it. It was cheaper that way. Then, on a Tuesday in February, my brother Derek called. I could hear the grin before he said a word. "Big news, Juan, I'm getting married." I sat down on my desk, honestly happy, and asked when. He said June of next year, at the Silver Birch Estate. Brittany wanted a long runway. And then his voice did the thing it does when the ask is coming. It warms up, like an engine. "And I need you." For one full breath I thought he meant beside him. Standing up front. Family. Then he finished the sentence. He needed help with the vendor deposits, the payment schedules, the logistics. "You're so good with that stuff," he said. I told him congratulations, and I meant it. I also noticed which job I'd been offered, and it wasn't sister. It was staff. To explain why I said yes anyway, I have to go back 16 years. My father, Frank Townsend, was a machinist. He fixed what was broken and paid for what he took, and he kept the family's money in a paper ledger with a green cover, the reason for every expense written in ink. He died on a Thursday morning when a lift at the shop failed. I was 22, 1 month out of college. Derek was 16, a sophomore with our father's smile and none of his silence. My mother, Carol, folded in on herself like a chair. She stopped opening mail, she stopped cooking. Some weeks she barely left the bedroom, and the house started drifting the way houses do when nobody steers. So I steered. I moved back into my childhood room, took a job doing payroll at the plastics plant, and opened Dad's green ledger to a fresh page. Mortgage, groceries, Derek's cleats. The reason column, in ink, the way Dad taught me. On the first page he ever showed me, he had written a rule at the top. Count what matters. I thought I understood it then. I didn't. What I learned that year is that grief splits a family into 2 jobs. There's the one who gets grieved over, held and watched and worried about. And there's the one who does the math. Nobody assigns the jobs out loud. You just wake up one morning and yours has your name on it, and it never comes off. My mother got to fall apart, and I don't blame her for that. But somebody had to keep the lights on while she did. That somebody was me, at 22. And the job description has never once been read aloud at a family dinner. Derek grieved beautifully. I know how that sounds, and I'm saying it anyway, because it matters later. At 16, he was already the boy the whole town rooted for. Drama club lead, homecoming court, The kid teachers forgave. After Dad died, people brought casseroles and looked at Derek with wet eyes, and he learned something in those months that shaped the rest of his life. He learned that being seen is a kind of currency. My mother came back to life through him. She'd sit in the front row of every play, every awards night, glowing like a woman plugged back into the wall. Watching Derek was easier than missing Frank, and I understood that, so I paid for it. Literally. 2 jobs, and the drama camp deposit, and the varsity jacket, and the senior trip. I signed the checks and sat in the back rows, and from back there I worked out the difference between my brother and me. Derek needed to be looked at. I needed to be useful. For years, I honestly believed those were just 2 dialects of the same language. 2 ways a family says it loves you. You get applauded or you get relied on. I told myself the reliable one was the load-bearing one, and load-bearing walls don't need applause. I passed my CPA exam at 24, studying at the kitchen table after Mom went to bed. I opened my own firm at 28. Nobody threw a party, and I told myself accountants don't want parties. I had built a whole quiet philosophy out of not being celebrated, and it held up fine for years, like a bridge that's never been load-tested. I thought being needed and being loved were the same thing. Only one of us in that house was right. 3 years ago, Derek quit his sales job to start an event styling company. He was 29, magnetic as ever, and he pitched me at my own kitchen table with a slideshow, Townsend Social. Curated events, styled parties, experiences people post about. He needed $25,000. I want to be clear about what I did, because it matters. I didn't hand my little brother a check and a hug. I drew up a promissory note. Repayment schedule, no interest, both signatures, the way I'd tell any client to do it. I'm his sister, not his bank, because the fastest way to lose a family is to let money float around it undocumented. Derek laughed when I slid the papers across the table. You and your paperwork, Juan. But he signed, still grinning, the pen loose in his hand, like the signing was a bit we were doing. I also gave him something I never invoiced. I set up his books and kept them myself. Every month. For free. Bank feed, reconciliations, quarterly numbers. I told him it was to protect his loan. My loan. And that was true. Here's what was also true. And it took me years to say it plainly. Part of me lent that money because of how it felt when he asked. My brother, who performed his whole life for everyone else, had come to my table and needed me in front of no audience at all. The reliable one, finally, on the program. I wrote the reason in Dad's old green ledger that night, the way I still did for anything that mattered. 25,000. Reason. Derek's start. If I'd been my own client, I would have asked one more question before the ink dried. What exactly does this man think money is for? I met Brittany Vale the following spring, at an engagement-adjacent dinner before there was an engagement, a rooftop place in Columbus where the menus had no prices and every plate got photographed before anyone ate. Brittany was lovely the way a catalog is lovely. 26 then, a brand consultant, hair like poured caramel, and a laugh she aimed like a flashlight. She called Derek, my creative director, and touched his sleeve when she said it, and he sat up straighter every time. I liked her fine. That's the honest truth. She was warm to me, asked about my firm, said, "That's so grounding," in a way that only stung later. When dessert came, she stood up and announced they wanted a photo. The whole family. And my chest did something embarrassing and hopeful. Then she handed me her phone. It happened so smoothly I was framing the shot before I understood the sentence. Derek, Brittany, my mother, the skyline. Brittany tilted her chin. My mother glowed. And I stood outside the picture holding the camera, directing them closer together like a person paid to be there. Nobody meant anything by it. That's what I told myself on the drive home, and here's the thing I'd tell you now, having had 2 years to think about it. Nobody ever means anything by it. Nobody plans to erase you. They just keep handing you the camera, and you keep taking it, because you're good with that stuff, and one day you realize you don't appear in a single frame of the family's story, and everyone is baffled that you mind. My mother posted the photo that night. Beautiful family, someone commented. She replied with a heart. I did the books for the man in the picture. The camera was mine too. 18 months ago, Derek came back to my kitchen table. No slideshow this time. Townsend Social was getting real traction, he said. But there was a venue. The Foundry House, an old ironworks downtown, brick and steel and 100-year bones. The owner wanted a tenant who'd make it shine. Derek needed $15,000 fast, a bridge to the venue deposit one deposit away from real. I looked at his books before I answered because I kept his books. Thin margins, spiky revenue, too much spent on how things looked. But not hopeless. And he was my brother. So I did what a professional does. I consolidated everything into one note. $40,000 total, $600 a month. First payment due the first of the following month. Both signatures again. He signed again. He hugged me again. And for 3 months, $600 arrived on the first, and I let myself feel good about it. The way you feel when a bridge holds. Then the payment stopped. No fight, no phone call. Just a quiet first of the month, and then another. And then every first after that. When I pressed, my mother called me before Derek could. Don't squeeze him now, honey. He's building something. Around the same time, his receipts stopped coming to my office. Then the bank feed disconnected. He'd changed his online banking password and never sent the new connection through. Busy with the wedding? He texted. I noticed all of it. I want that on the record. I noticed. But collecting from your own brother means a courtroom with your mother in the second row, and I wasn't ready to buy that ticket. So I watched the columns go quiet. In my job, numbers that go quiet are never resting. They're hiding. Wedding planning swallowed the spring, and my assignments arrived by group text. Pick up the welcome bags from the printer. Confirm the shuttle times. Build the vendor payment schedule. You're so good with that stuff. I did each one, on time, the way I do everything. What never arrived was a roll. Brittany had 6 bridesmaids, college friends and cousins in matching silk robes with their names embroidered on the pocket. There was a dress-fitting day with champagne. I saw it in the photos afterward. There was a toast list. I wasn't on it. I told myself I didn't care about robes and champagne, and mostly that was true. I'm 38. I've buried a father and built a business. I don't need a silk robe. But I'd be lying if I said I wanted nothing, so here is what I wanted. The whole modest inventory of it. I wanted to stand in the family photo. The formal one, the one that gets framed and hung in a hallway for the next 40 years. The one my mother would point to when she got old. I wanted to be in the picture with my mother and my brother, and I wanted a seat at the family table while everyone else looked at it. That's all. 16 years of ledgers and lights kept on, and my whole asking price was 1 photograph and 1 chair. It seemed so small a thing, so automatic, that I never even said it out loud. You don't request a seat at your own family's table. You'd only embarrass everyone, most of all yourself, by revealing you weren't sure you had one. Instead, I did something that felt, at the time, like the surest way to belong. I opened my checkbook, and I started writing. I wrote the check for $20,000. I know how that number sounds after everything I've just told you. Sit with the math of it. A brother owing me $38,000 and change, nearly a year of quiet firsts of the month, and his sister writing a 5-figure gift anyway. But it wasn't payment on delusion. It was a founder's gift. That's the phrase I used in my own head. The kind of money that says, your start was real, your family built it with you, go. I chose a cream envelope, heavy stock. On the front I wrote, for Derek and Brittany, from the very first ledger. Love, Wanda. The first ledger was a joke only Derek would get. When he was 9, I'd kept a notebook for his lunch money and his allowance, teaching him columns. And he'd loved it, back when being taught by his sister was still a thing he loved. I sealed the envelope and set it on my desk, and that night the seating chart arrived. Brittany's maid of honor sent it to the full guest list by mistake. A cheerful yellow spreadsheet, every table numbered, every soul assigned. I found the head table. Derek, Brittany, Mom, Brittany's parents. Brittany's grandmother. And in the last chair, a name I didn't recognize. Kyle. I scrolled the whole sheet twice looking for my own name, the way you pat your pockets for keys you already know are gone. I found myself at table 14. I gave it a night before I said anything, because I've learned that anger files better in the morning. Then I called Derek, calm as a dial tone, and asked if the spreadsheet was a draft. He did the little laugh he does when he's buying time. It's Brittany's thing, Juan. Let me look. Brittany called me back herself within the hour, which I'll credit her for, and she was sweet the whole way through, which somehow made it worse. The head table isn't really a family thing, she said. It's a visual anchor. The photographer builds the whole room shot around it, so the layout is curated. It's honestly nothing personal. Curated. I work with words all day. Invoice, accrual, liability. Words that mean what they mean. This one I turned over for weeks like a coin I couldn't spend. My seat at my brother's wedding had been curated, and Kyle, whoever Kyle was, fit the composition better than I did. I asked her, still pleasant, where family was supposed to sit. And she said, bright as a bell? Everyone's family. That's the vibe of the whole day. Derek called that evening. I'll fix it, Juan, I promise, it's just chairs. Then my mother, who had heard everything from everyone, closed the case the way she always closes it. Honey, don't make waves before their big day. You know how much pressure they're under. I said, okay. I want to be honest about that. I said, okay, because I had 16 years of practice saying it, and because some part of me still believed the fix was coming. That's the last time I mistook a promise from my brother for a line item. A promise is not a booking. Any accountant will tell you the difference between the two is where all the grief in the world lives. Table 14, by the way, was next to the kitchen doors. I looked it up on the floor plan. Even my exile had been curated. The rehearsal dinner was at a restored barn with chandeliers, which tells you everything about the budget I was supposedly imagining. I spent the first hour of it working. The caterer had the count wrong by a dozen plates, and the coordinator, Marissa, a competent woman with an earpiece and a clipboard, grabbed my elbow because word had spread that I was the one who handles things. I handled it. I moved 2 tables, called the caterer's manager, solved it, and when I got back my seat had been cleared because they thought I'd left. I stood at the edge of the room with a glass of wine that had been poured for someone else, and that's where I overheard one of the Vale cousins, a tall girl with a French manicure, ask another one who I was. That's the sister, the second one said. She's like, not really wedding people. Not really wedding people. I filed it. Filing is what I do. Then came the toasts, and Derek stood up with a microphone he did not need because his voice has carried since he was 16. He thanked Brittany's parents for welcoming me like a son. He thanked his mother, my rock, who taught me what devotion looks like. He thanked the bridesmaids, the coordinator, the barn. Then he raised his glass higher and said the line that mattered. To everyone who believed in us before it looked like anything, this next chapter is for you. Next week we sign the lease on the Foundry House, our forever venue. It's happening, people. The room whooped. My mother wiped her eyes, and I stood at the edge of the light doing the one piece of arithmetic nobody else in the barn could do. The man toasting everyone who believed in us had a believer 40 feet away, holding someone else's wine, $38,000 deep, and he had not said her name into that microphone once. Next week, a lease. Signed with what? I wondered. Anchored on whom? I already knew. I just didn't know I knew. The morning of the wedding, I was at the venue by 7, because Marissa had asked me to bring the printed timelines and nobody questions why the sister has a job and no robe. The Silver Birch Estate is a glass ballroom on 40 acres, stone floors, white gravel, the kind of place that photographs like heaven and invoices like surgery. I was laying the schedules out on the vendor table when I saw the photographer's shot list sitting in the pile, 3 stapled pages, and I read it because reading paperwork is a reflex I will never lose. Page 2. Family formals, golden hour, Derek plus Carol, Derek plus the Vales, couple plus both sets of parents, couple plus grandparents. And then, in the margin, in the photographer's own handwriting, a note that had clearly come from a phone call. Keep frame tight. Immediate only. I checked page 3. Under Candids, Optional, Reception, between the flower girls and the shuttle departure. Sister? With the question mark. That question mark did something to me that all the seating charts in the world hadn't. I took the list to my mother, who was steaming her dress in the bridal cottage, and I held it out and pointed, and I watched her read it. I watched her understand it. My mother is not a stupid woman. Then she folded the list along its crease, handed it back, and said, "Honey, it's their day. Don't make it about you." There it was. Not Brittany's rule, my mother's. The house rule I'd been raised under, spoken plainly at last. Other people get days. You get tasks. Something in me went very still and very organized, the way my office gets at 5 o'clock. That night, I mean the night before, but I felt it finish that morning. I stopped waiting to be defended. If you've ever been the one holding the camera at every family event, the one who pays and plans and vanishes from the album, tell me in the comments where they seated you at the last family wedding. I have a feeling table 14 is crowded. Stay with me. Because the envelope comes next, and subscribe so you don't miss what I did with it. I should say here that 2 nights before the wedding, my brother came to my house at 2 in the morning. I'm telling it out of order because I needed you to see the shot list first, the way I wish I had. He sat on my porch steps in a hoodie, no camera-ready anything, and for an hour he was 16 again. The wedding was $90,000 over what he'd told anyone, he said. The veils expected a certain level. A styling brand was sponsoring the florals in exchange for content, and there was a videographer coming whose follower count he quoted like a credit score. "If it doesn't look right, none of it's real, Juan," he said, and he laughed like it was a joke. And it was not a joke. People only invest in what already shines. Nobody writes a check to a guy who looks like he needs one. Then he stopped performing entirely, which I had not seen since the funeral, and said, "I've been scared of being nobody since Dad died. You don't know what that's like, because you've never needed anyone to watch you. God, I used to wish I was built like that." It's the closest thing to seeing me that my brother ever managed, and I have turned it over many nights since. Then he asked for what he'd come for. The Foundry House lease was ready. 5 years, $6,200 a month. And the landlord wanted a personal guarantor, someone with real credit standing behind the paper. Friday after the wedding, 9 in the morning. "You wouldn't be paying anything, Juan. You'd just be believing in me. Officially." I told him I'd think about it, and I meant it, which is the part I'd take back if I could take back only one thing. He hugged me at the door. It lasted exactly as long as he needed it to. Then his headlights swung off my street, toward the version of his life with an audience, and I stood in my dark kitchen doing math I didn't want to do. The morning of the wedding, before the venue, before the shot list, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and my father's green ledger, the way I do on days that count. The cover has gone soft at the corners, like an old dollar bill. 16 years of my handwriting in there, stacked on top of 1 year of his. I opened to a clean line and wrote the date, June 14th, and the entry, Derek's wedding. Gift, $20,000. Then the reason column, which my father never once left blank. Reason. Family. Dad had a rule about that column. Never write the reason in pencil. If you aren't sure enough to use ink, he'd say, you aren't sure enough to spend the money. I wrote mine in pen. That was my first mistake of the day, though it wouldn't feel like one for hours. I slid the check inside the cream envelope, sealed it, pressed the flap down with my thumb the way you press on a bruise, and set it in my good handbag. Navy dress. Ironed the night before. Low heels because I knew I'd be working. In the mirror by the door I looked exactly like what I am. A woman who owns her house, runs her books, shows up early. Competent, presentable, invisible, if a room decides so. But that was the room's choice, and I hadn't fully learned it yet. I remember touching the envelope once more at a red light on Route 9 and feeling, God help me, proud. $20,000 of belief, sealed and addressed. I was still trying to buy my seat at that table. I just thought the currency was generosity. Keep your eye on that envelope. Everything that happens for the rest of this story happens because of where it sat and who reached for it. Weddings are businesses that last one day, and like most businesses, they run on somebody who isn't in the brochure. By 9 that morning, the florist had delivered short, 2 arrangements missing from the order, and the driver was already gone. Marissa got that look coordinators get, and I did what I do. Called the shop, negotiated pickup of the display pieces from their cooler, paid the difference on my own card, told them we'd sort it later. Nobody asked how it got fixed. The cake arrived leaning like pizza. I found the baker's assistant and a level and a chilled room, and we fixed that too. Around 11, the bridesmaids came through the vendor hall in their embroidered robes, a wall of silk and curling irons, and lowered their voices when they passed me the way people do around staff. And then, there was Kyle. I met Kyle before I knew what Kyle was. He came through the loading door carrying a ring light like a ceremonial spear, gimbal in the other hand, sunglasses parked in his hair indoors. He was a boyfriend of one of Brittany's cousins, and he had a following. I never did learn for what. And he'd been invited. I'd learn later, specifically to capture content the couple could use. He mistook me for venue staff. To be fair, everyone had, all morning, and I'd stopped correcting anyone. He handed me the ring light without a hello and asked if I could hold it steady while he tested angles by the cake. I held it. I want you to really see this, because I've thought about it 100 times since. The bride's cousins +1, testing his angles, lit by the groom's sister, 4 hours before she found out he was sitting in her chair. When he had his shot, he took the light back and said, "You're a lifesaver, sweetheart." Somewhere across the lawn, the string quartet started tuning. Golden hour was 7 hours out, and the photographer was taping his shot list to a garden wall. Here's the part I don't say bitterly, because it wouldn't be true. The ceremony was beautiful. They stood under an arch of white roses I had partially rescued that morning, and my baby brother's voice broke on his vows, and I don't believe that was performance. Whatever else he is, he loves her, or loves the life she makes possible, and standing in the June light it looked like the same thing. I was seated in the 3rd row, not the front row with my mother, who sat flanked by the veils. The usher had walked me past that row with an apologetic hand and settled me next to my Aunt Lorna, my father's sister, 70 years old, wearing the good brooch and an expression like a sealed envelope. Lorna took my hand during the vows and didn't let go. When Derek said, "I will," my mother turned around, glowing, scanning faces. And her eyes went right over me, the way a flashlight goes over a thing it isn't looking for. Lorna saw it too. She leaned toward my ear, quiet as a pew creak, and said, "Your father counted what mattered. This bunch counts what glitters." I squeezed her hand and watched my brother kiss his bride, and the 200-odd guests rose around me, and I rose with them, clapping, meaning it, my chest doing that complicated thing where love and grief share a wall. For about 90 seconds I believed the day might simply be a wedding, that the chart and the shot list were logistics, not verdicts. Then the applause thinned, the quartet swelled, and the photographer's assistant cupped his hands and called across the lawn the sentence I'd been bracing for without admitting it. "Family formals in 10 minutes. Immediate family and wedding party. Gather by the garden wall." I walked toward the garden wall because I am his sister, and because there are sentences you refuse to finish learning until they're read to you out loud. The light was doing what June light does at 6 o'clock, turning everyone gold. Photographer crouched, assistant wrangling, the veils assembling like a board of directors. My mother stood at the center in her lavender dress, hands clasped, happier than I'd seen her in years, and I felt the old reflex, "Go stand with your mother," carry my feet across the grass. I got within arm's reach. I was actually lifting my hand toward her shoulder. That's when Marissa stepped between us, clipboard first, earpiece crackling, voice in that syrup register that event professionals use for problems. "Hi, we're doing immediate family and wedding party only right now." I said, "I'm his sister." Not sharp, just a fact. Offered the way you'd hand someone your ID. Marissa looked down at her clipboard, and I watched her find the list, and I watched her not find my name on it, and I watched her decide not to say that part out loud. Her ear crackled again. She pressed her finger to it, listening, eyes flicking to the bridal party cluster where Brittany stood in her second dress of the day. Derek was 4 feet away, close enough to hear all of it, straightening his boutonniere. He looked at me. He looked at Marissa. And then, my brother, whose cleats I bought, whose books I kept, whose bridge loans I funded, looked at the photographer and rolled his shoulders back into position. Marissa's ear finished crackling. She turned back to me, smile refreshed, and delivered the message she'd just been handed, word for word, in front of my mother, the veils, and God. Could you stand near the wall for these? We need the picture to be right. Stand near the wall. There was a stone wall bordering the garden, waist high, 100 years old, and she gestured at it with an open palm, gracious as a maitre d'. The picture needed to be right, and I was the thing that could make it wrong. Derek didn't let the silence sit. He came over. Finally, he came over, and put his hand on my arm and said, low, warm, the voice he uses on clients. Just for the formals, Juan, you get it. Brit's got this whole visual thing, and honestly the light's brutal past the wall anyway. He squeezed my elbow. You get it. Twice. Because the first one hadn't convinced either of us. I looked at my mother. This is the detail I'd cut if I could, because it's the one that still aches. My mother heard all of it, and she was already turning back toward the camera, smoothing lavender fabric over her hips, finding her angle. Not cruel, just compliant. The photographer said beautiful to nobody in particular. So I went and stood near the wall. I want to be precise, because precision is what I have instead of poetry. I stood near the wall with the pressed stone top warm under my palm, and I watched my family arrange itself into its official version: mother, son, bride, the veils, golden hour. And I was not in it, and everyone could see me not being in it. And the shutter went off like a small polite door closing, many times. At some point Kyle drifted into the back of one frame with his gimbal, grinning, and the photographer waved him through. The +1 made the album. I'm told the prints came out beautifully. The reception had one more surprise for me. It was sitting in my chair. The place cards were little brass frames. Of course they were frames, arranged alphabetically on a table of black velvet. I found mine. Wanda Townsend, table 14. So the fix Derek had promised turned out to be a fix in the other direction, the kind you do to a race. I carried my little brass frame across the ballroom, past table 1, and that's where I saw him. Kyle. In the last chair at the family table, my chair by any accounting on earth, with the ring light on a mini tripod planted next to the centerpiece like a flag on a moon. He had his phone horizontal, and he was interviewing my mother. Okay, mother of the groom, tell the camera what today means to you. And my mother, who does not know what a follower is, bloomed under the attention like a garden under rain and told Kyle's phone that today was everything, that her family was everything. I stood 10 feet away holding my own name in a frame, listening to my mother tell a stranger's audience that family was everything. Brittany saw me. I know she saw me, because her eyes did the thing. The flick, the assessment, the decision. And then she turned, radiant, to greet an arriving guest. Derek was on the dance floor being photographed from below by a second videographer, jacket hooked on one finger over his shoulder, a pose he has practiced since 10th grade. Nobody was being wicked. I need you to understand that, because it took me so long to. Nobody twirled a mustache. They just arranged the room by value, the way they understood value, and the math put the man with the audience at the head table and the woman with the ledgers by the kitchen doors. Table 14 taught me more in 1 hour than Table 1 had taught me in 38 years. Table 14, by the kitchen doors, turned out to be where they'd filed everyone who didn't photograph. Aunt Lorna, my father's cousin Walt, who is mostly deaf and entirely wonderful. A teenage second cousin on his phone. A retired pastor nobody could place. The invoice table, Lorna called it, before the salads came. The people who paid for some part of this and got filed away. She said it cheerfully and clinked my glass. The kitchen doors swung behind us like applause every 90 seconds, and from that unphotographed corner, I did what I suppose I was always going to do. I audited the room. I couldn't help it. It's the only language I'm fluent in. The florals were a sponsored trade, fine, but the string quartet was union scale times 4 hours. The champagne tower was real French, not Prosecco. The second dress, the videographer with the drone license, the lighting package alone. I had built vendor payment schedules for this wedding, but those schedules had covered maybe half of what my eyes were pricing in that ballroom. I had reconciled Derek's business for 3 years. I knew his balance sheet the way I know my own porch light, and I sat at table 14 doing quiet arithmetic and arriving, again and again, at the same missing line. None of this room existed on paper. Not his paper, anyway. A wedding is the one audit a family performs in public, and the numbers in front of me had a source I hadn't been shown. I was still working the problem when 2 bridesmaids dropped into the empty chairs beside me, refugees from the dance floor, shoes in their hands, close enough that I could smell hairspray and champagne. They didn't notice me. People that day generally didn't. Then one of them started talking. Okay, but how are they affording this? Nobody makes this off styling parties. That was the first bridesmaid. The second one laughed into her glass. Britt told me the investor money came through, like, right in time. The deposit on this place, the florals upgrade, dress number 2. All off the business account. She lowered her voice into the register people save for delicious things. And get this. The investor is family, so it's basically free money. No terms, no drama. Britt calls it the family round. The kitchen doors swung. Somebody's entree went by under a silver dome. I sat very still with my hands in my lap, and inside my head, month after month of quiet columns stood up and walked into the light one by one. $15,000, wired by me, for a bridge to a venue deposit. The silver birch deposit? I knew this room's rate card. I had built the payment schedule around everything except the venue, which Derek had insisted he'd handled. The timeline snapped together with the small, ugly click of a drawer closing. There was no bridge. There was never a bridge. The bridge was this. The tower. The quartet. The second dress. The golden hour I had just spent standing next to a wall. My money hadn't been keeping his dream alive. It had built the stage for the single most expensive photograph my family ever took. The one I was curated out of. The investor is family. It's basically free. I stood up. I didn't storm anywhere. I want that understood. I walked out to the glass hallway between the ballroom and the terrace, where it was cooler, and I stood at the window with my clutch under my arm like a woman waiting for a valet. Through the glass. My family. Derek spinning Britney under the lights to a song I'd heard him practice to in our living room at 17. My mother laughing at something a veil said. Champagne high, 20 years younger tonight. All of it golden. All of it curated, all of it. I finally let the word finish, funded. Behind me, on the gift table by the doors, my cream envelope. $20,000. From the very first ledger. Love, Wanda. I thought about the reason column, written in pen that morning. Reason. Family. My father never let me write in pencil, and standing at that window I understood him for the first time all the way down. The ink wasn't the commitment. The ink was the test. If the reason stops being true, you don't get to smudge it. You have to draw the line through it, in front of God and your own handwriting, and write what's actually true underneath. Lorna appeared beside me the way old women appear, silently and exactly on time. She looked through the glass with me for a while. Then she said, "You don't owe the wall anything, honey." I walked back in through the main doors. The gift table was on my left. The gift table sat by the entrance, a white-clothed altar stacked with silver boxes and a birdcage for cards, and my cream envelope leaned against the cage where I'd placed it 5 hours earlier, back when I still thought I was buying a beginning. I picked it up. That's all. At first, I picked up an envelope with my own name on it, and the room changed temperature. A bridesmaid at the guest book stand went still. Brittany materialized the way she did all day, radar-guided, lovely, and said, "Wanda? What are you doing?" She said it loudly enough that the nearest tables turned, which I don't think she planned, and the quartet chose that moment to rest between songs, which nobody planned, and so my answer landed in one of those silences that weddings produce exactly once a night. I said, "It's addressed from me. I'm taking it back." And then, because 16 years is a long time to prepare a single sentence without knowing it, "Don't worry. I'll stay out of the frame forever." I set my empty champagne glass down next to the birdcage, gently, the way you return something borrowed, and I walked. Heels on stone, 3 beats to a step, the doors already being opened for me by a caterer who had decided hours ago I was staff, and was, in the only way that mattered that day, correct. Behind me, the room came back to life all at once, the way a held breath breaks. I heard my mother say my name. I heard Derek say it louder. The gravel was white in the floodlights, and I was 10 steps into it when my brother came running. Actually running, boutonniere first, calling, Wanda, wait, do you have any idea what this looks like?" People ask if my hands were shaking when I picked up that envelope. They weren't. 20 years of writing other people's numbers steadies your hands. If you've ever taken something back, a gift, a promise, your own time, tell me in the comments what it was, and stay with me. Because what my brother did 5 days later is the part nobody believes. In the parking lot, under the floodlights, my brother finally gave me his full attention. I had waited 16 years for it, and now that it arrived, it was an audit of optics. "Do you know what you're doing to me tonight? The veils are in there. The videographer is in there." His voice cracked on videographer, and there it was. The true hierarchy of his griefs. Ranked live. I said, "I do know. For once, I'm not in charge of how things look." And I got in my car, and I drove the 40 minutes home to Millbrook with the envelope on the passenger seat like a rescued pet, and my phone began to glow before I'd left the gates. It did not stop glowing for 3 days. My mother's voicemail, one of many. "You embarrassed him in front of the veils. Whatever this is about, bring the envelope back tomorrow and we'll forget the whole scene." Cousins I hadn't heard from in years surfaced to type the word classy with a period on it. Brittany's account posted the golden hour photo that same night. The wall one, the one that needed to be right, captioned, "Family is everything." And the comments bloomed with hearts. Not one person, in 3 days of ringing, asked me why. That's the part I'd tell a stranger first. An entire family mobilized overnight to manage how my leaving looked. Nobody anywhere asked what had made me go. Monday morning, Derek reopened the books. He had no choice, and after what I found in them, neither did I. Here's the thing about needing a lease by Friday. Landlords want financials, and financials come from accountants, and his accountant was me. Monday, an email from Derek, subject line, "Docs for landlord," no mention of the wedding, as if Saturday had been weather. He restored my access to the business bank feed, the one that had been dark for 2 months, because he needed clean statements assembled by Thursday. So I reconciled. It took 1 pot of coffee. The $15,000 bridge loan, wired 18 months ago, sat in the business account for 9 days. Then, Silver Birch Estate, deposit, $9,500. A bridal boutique, a florist upgrade invoice, the part the sponsorship didn't cover. Within 1 week, my bridge had become a wedding, 18 months before the wedding, and the business account now held less than 1 month of the Foundry House's rent. On paper, the plan was arithmetic in a party hat. Sign a 5-year lease at $6,200 a month on the strength of a guarantor. Me, the believer, officially. I wrote him a short email. "We need to talk before Friday." Then I printed 2 documents and set them on my coffee table. The consolidated promissory note with both our signatures, and 1 page of the bank feed with 3 lines highlighted in yellow. He never answered the email. Thursday night, headlights swung into my driveway, and 2 car doors slammed. My brother had brought reinforcements. My mother came through my door first, which was the strategy. and I knew it was the strategy. And it worked on me anyway. A little. The way a key works on a lock it was cut for. She hugged me. She smelled like the perfume Dad bought her every Christmas, which she has never once changed, and she said, "Sweetheart, this family has had enough drama for 1 year." Derek came in behind her carrying a leather folio, wearing the client voice and the client posture, and I watched my living room become a pitch meeting. They sat on my couch. I sat in Dad's old reading chair, which I'd taken when Mom cleared the house, and which Derek has never once recognized. He opened with the apology. Smooth, structured, 3 acts. The seating was a coordination failure. The photos were the photographer being rigid. He'd handle Brittany's family. He was sorry I'd felt sidelined, a construction I want framed someday. The feeling assigned to me, the doing assigned to no one. Then, pivot, folio open, and there it was on my coffee table next to my 2 documents, which he had not yet noticed. The lease. Tabbed with little arrow stickers, sunshine yellow, marking every line where a signature belonged. 9 o'clock tomorrow, Derek said. The landlord's holding it for me, but he's got another party interested, Juan. This is real. He turned the folio toward me. 1 signature. You're not paying a dime. It's just... The bank looks at me and sees a startup. They look at you and see 20 years of solid ground. I need to borrow your solid ground for 1 page. My mother leaned in with her line, and I truly don't know if they rehearsed it or if 40 years of marriage to a good man just produces sentences shaped like him. Family shows up, honey. Your father would have signed it before Derek finished asking. The clock over my stove ticked. It's a loud clock. I keep it because the tick sounds like a metronome, and metronomes keep honest time. I looked at my mother. And at my brother. And at the yellow arrows all pointing at the version of me they had come to collect. Then I reached over, slid my 2 pages out from under the lease, and laid them on top. Before Friday, I said. That's what I wrote. It's Thursday. Let's talk. I did it the way I do it for clients whose businesses are dying and don't know it yet. No adjectives, just lines. I read the promissory note first. 40,000 consolidated, both signatures, 600 a month. You made the first 3 payments, I said. $1,800, then 11 months of nothing. Current balance, 38,200. Derek shifted. Juan, the business? I held up the 2nd page. This is the business. 3 yellow lines, the bridge loan arriving. 9 days later, Silver Birch Estate, deposit, 9,500. The boutique, the florist. You told me venue deposit, I said, keeping my voice in the register I use for reading numbers out loud, which is the calmest register I own. It was a venue deposit. It was just never your venue. It was your wedding, 18 months out. My bridge went to the party, Derek. And Saturday, I stood at the wall I paid for. My mother said my name like a caution sign. Derek stood up, sat down, and then the polish came off all at once, the way it had on my porch at 2 in the morning, except this time what was under it wasn't fear. It was doctrine. You want me to say it? Fine. The wedding was the business plan. That's how it works now, Juan. The veils, the vendors, the real. You think clients read balance sheets? Nobody invests in a guy who looks broke. They invest in a guy whose life looks like proof. Every dollar in that room Saturday comes back double once the foundry deal. He heard himself say foundry and stopped, because even he could hear the circle closing. The party justified by the lease funded by the signature owed by the sister who'd been shown to a wall. The clock ticked. My mother chose that silence to deploy the artillery, quietly, the way it's most effective. Your father would be ashamed of you tonight, Wanda. And there it was. The sentence that had run my life for 16 years, finally spoken instead of implied. I didn't raise my voice. I have never once needed to. It's the one inheritance nobody could reassign. Dad kept his reasons in ink, Mom. I have his ledger. I've read all 16 years of it, and mine underneath his. And you know whose name fills the giving column? Mine. Every page. So don't hand me his shame. I've done the math on what he'd think, and I did it in his own handwriting. Derek reached over, turned the lease right side up, and pushed it across the table until it touched my hand. Then he opened the pen. And then my brother, who has read a room every day of his life, read mine and changed products. He stopped selling the lease and started selling the thing he knew I actually wanted, the thing I had wanted so long it had a permanent shape in me. Sign it, he said, softly now, leaning in. And everything goes back to normal. Better than normal. You're at every table, Juan. Christmas at Mom's. The photos. God, all the photos. I'll make Britt put you front and center. You're my sister. Your family again. All of it. Back. Tomorrow. One page. I want to be honest with you, because this story is worthless if I'm not. It worked. For about the length of 3 ticks of that kitchen clock, I sat in my father's chair and felt the full pull of it. Every Christmas, every frame, my mother's face turned toward me, the seat, the whole warm-lit room of belonging, hanging off the tip of one pen. He wasn't lying either. That's the terrible part. He would have done it. I could have bought it all back Thursday night, the way I had been buying it since I was 22, one check, one rescue, one silence at a time. It was never that they wouldn't sell me a place in this family. It was that the rent never, ever stopped. I looked at the pen. Then I set my hand flat on the lease, and I slid it back across the table and I said, "No, I won't guarantee the lease." My mother made a small sound. I kept going, because the next part mattered more. "And I'm not calling the note, Derek. I'm not here to bury you. The schedule stands. The one you signed. $600 a month, starting this month. Sell the foundry deposit if the landlord allows the transfer. Run your events in rented rooms until the debt is real to you, and I'll transfer your books to Hartman's office Monday. They're good. They'll charge you. Which is the point." Derek stared at me the way you stare at a machine that has always worked. "You'd rather keep your money than your family?" And that's when I finally said the true thing, and it came out level, and I watched it land. I've been the frame for 16 years, Derek. I held the picture up, and I held it steady, and I was never once in it. Frames don't get a seat. I'm done renting one. I stood and I picked up the lease, and I placed it back in his folio, and closed the cover the way I close a client's file when the engagement is over. The account is closed. My mother rose off my couch, and here is the cost, the part I knew was coming and chose anyway. She didn't walk toward me. She gathered her purse, touched Derek's shoulder, and moved to the door. She chose the child who shines. She always had. I had just finally stopped outbidding him. At the door, my mother paused and said, "I don't know when I'll be able to forgive this, Wanda." I said, "I know, Mom. Drive safe." That's all I had, and it was enough, because it was true. Derek stopped on the porch, half in the yellow light, and for a second the salesman was gone again and the 16-year-old looked out. "You were the only one who ever showed up," he said. "I know," I said. "That was the problem." He nodded slowly, like a man agreeing with a diagnosis, and followed our mother to the car. The headlights swept my living room wall. The wall, I noticed, bare, because I'd never gotten around to hanging anything on it. And then my house was quiet, in a way it had never been quiet before. Not the quiet of waiting for the phone, the quiet after an engine you've heard your whole life finally shuts off. I sat back down in Dad's chair with the green ledger and opened it to June 14th. Derek's wedding. Gift. $20,000. Reason. Family. Ink. Like he taught me. So I did what he taught me comes next, when the reason stops being true. One line through the entry, ruler straight. The old entry left legible under the strike. "You never erase," he'd say. "You correct." And underneath, the new line, dated the 19th. Return to owner. Reason. Same. Because it was the same reason. Everything I ever gave, I gave for family. Taking myself back was the first time I'd understood what the word had to mean for me to stay alive inside it. Friday came and went. 9 o'clock arrived in some office across town, and no call came, and no pen scratched. And somewhere, a landlord shook hands with his other interested party. The Foundry House lease died quietly, the way things die when nobody underwrites them. I slept that night like the books had balanced, because they had. 4 months went by before my doorbell rang again. Here's what the wreckage actually looked like, because I promised you honest math. Derek did not go bankrupt. Losing the Foundry House cost him the $4,000 holding deposit and the version of himself that came with brick and steel, and it turned out the second loss was the useful one. Townsend Social still exists. It runs events in rented rooms now, a brewery taproom, a botanical garden pavilion, other people's venues, other people's leases. And by every account the events are good, because the truth about my brother is that he was always talented. The talent was just wearing a costume it couldn't afford. On the first of the month after that Thursday, $600 arrived in my account. I stared at it the way you'd stare at rain in a drought. On the first of the next month, it came again. And again. And again. 4 payments now. 4 firsts of the month. Not one of them late. 35,800 to go. I'm not sentimental about it. And neither is the amortization table. But the 4th payment came with something the schedule didn't require. An envelope, plain paper, my address in my brother's handwriting. Inside, no letter. Just a photograph, an old one, the corner creased white. Me at 15 and Derek at 9 on the front steps of Dad's shop, my arm around his neck. Both of us mid-laugh at something 40 feet outside the frame. On the back, in pen. Found this in Mom's attic. You were always in the picture back then. D. He didn't post it. There was nowhere to post it that would earn him anything. No audience. No aesthetic. A creased photo mailed for the private reason that he wanted his sister to have it. It's the first thing my brother has given me in 16 years that wasn't a performance, and I've decided to let it count. Carefully. The way you extend a small line of credit to someone rebuilding. My mother and I speak. Birthdays, holidays, brief calls with long silences shaped like a lavender dress in a garden wall. She still posts the wedding photos when the anniversary content comes around. The world she lives in didn't change Thursday night, and I've stopped billing myself for that. She tells people I'm taking space, which means she's still managing how it looks. I let her. It no longer prices me. Lorna comes on Sundays now, with pie, and Walt sometimes, and we eat in my kitchen under the loud clock. And I am learning that a family can be a thing you assemble as well as a thing you survive. And in October, Townsend Accounting turned 10 years old. My 3 employees surprised me with a cake and a photographer. A kid from the community college, $20 an hour, no shot list. In the picture we took, I am standing in the middle, flour white frosting smear on my knuckle, laughing with my whole face. I had it framed in brass, and I hung it on my living room wall, the bare one the headlights used to sweep. I don't stand near walls anymore. I hang things on them. Some accounts, once closed, set you free. If the people you love only make room for you when you're paying for the room, with your money, your labor, or your silence, then taking yourself back isn't revenge, and it isn't abandonment, and it isn't pride. It's the first honest entry in your own ledger, written in ink, in the column nobody ever taught you that you were allowed to use. That's my story. 1 envelope, 1 signature I never gave, and a seat I finally stopped renting. If this reminded you of a table you've been paying for, take it as your sign. Your name belongs in the picture, not behind the camera. If you know someone sitting at table 14 tonight, share this video with them, then drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.